Hey, I'm Rainer. I'm founder of the Mindful Leader and also founder of the Fellowship of Mindful Tech Leaders. I have a special guest here with me today, Teemu Arina. And I'm really very glad and happy that Teemu could squeeze out some time from his busy schedule and be with us and share some of his insights around the whole area of biohacking, but even broader, really optimization of health and prevention and well-being. So a lot of cool topics we can go in here today. Uh, Quick introduction, Timo has a professional career of 2 decades as a technology entrepreneur, author, and professional speaker. Is one of the forefront thinkers on digital transformation, learning, work, leadership, health, and eventually also the future of humanity. His work is focusing on studying the intersection of man, machine, and ways to improve productivity, health, well-being with biological and technological tools, which is really near the heart of my efforts as well, as I'm a technologist as well. I worked on machine learning, deep learning. I built up Zalando Research, a basically think tank in quotes of deep learning research scientists, and really looking at hard problems nowadays that you can tackle if there's more and more data available. And now if you take this Zalando, when I was working there, the topics were around fashion, right? Now shifting into well-being, into health is a huge opportunity which we're currently all in. And that's why I'm glad here to have Timo here. So Timo, first, welcome.
Thank you.
And and then maybe you can share a little bit on your side in terms of your journey and where you came from and basically what brought you this into this moment in time, and then we can go from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much. So my background is I'm a technology entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 16. I'm close to 40 now, and I've gone through, what it means to run a business, like doing things in the startup world, raising venture capital, basically, pushing the boundaries of my own health also in the process, thinking I was living my dream. And in the process, I was also a management consultant for many big companies and government institutions and so on digital transformation, like how they can use these tools and technologies to improve the way how they work and do things. So I was very early on into social media and social technology. So I started my first blog in 2003 when very few people knew what that even is. And I was very early on into these new platforms, and I did teach like large companies how to adapt them and how to use collaborative technologies and tools and all that. And so for me, that culminated when I was 30. I basically, like, I guess when you turn 30, you see the first signs of aging. I I got a stress-related illness. One of the symptoms of that was a chronic ulcer. So basically, a wound in the stomach that didn't heal, and I basically that I went to doctor like many people would do in this situation. I got some medication. It helped to manage the pain, but it didn't really bring my energy levels back to where they were before. So I was struggling with that. And when I got like re-prescribed some medication and I started studying like what I'm taking, I realized that you're not supposed to take these for a long period of time. It's like for temporary use. My doctor told me that these things, yeah, there are some stressful business leaders, they need to take these for the rest of their lives. And I was like, no, I'm not going to take this rest of my life. So I started like studying like inflammation. I started looking at, I started from my own condition, but I expanded very soon to um, basically like looking at inflammation from a deeper point of view. And inflammation is behind most disease and prognosis and regenerative diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular disease and so on, like which are modern man's problems. And I started like going really deep. And because I had a background in systems thinking and understanding complex systems, I started looking at the human body as a biological computer and complex system. And in that process, I met a doctor called Olli Sovijärvi from Finland, and a nutrition specialist. I'm a technologist, so I started looking at technology, like how I can use different technologies to make this black box visible. So in organizations, I was used to looking at key performance indicators, like how the business is doing. So I wanted to see like what are the key performance indicators for my body, and while going into it, I got interested in biomarkers, and I want to do a bunch of lab tests to get a whole total picture of what's going on. So doctors, they wouldn't send you to a lab for a specific test unless they are suspicious of a specific disease. So if there is no symptoms or whatever, like conditions, they're not doing unnecessary tests. So I basically packed my luggage and went to Estonia from Finland, where I went to a lab and I gave them the money and I want to do these tests. So and I got them back, and that gave me a more systemic view of what's going on. And at that time, that was around 2012, I also got into wearable technologies, so different kind of like activity trackers and so on that you can measure your heart rate and nervous system state and sleep quality, and even like EEG readers that help you to read brain waves and a bunch of things. So I was in the middle of developing my own protocol for healing myself, and which was based on reducing inflammation on a very systemic way. So it included stress management techniques, different ways to improve sleep and recovery, different dietary interventions to avoid food items that would increase inflammation, including food items that would statistically and from literature perspective reduce inflammation. So I designed my own anti-inflammatory diet also in the process while reading a lot of like medical literature, and had a pretty much a crash course in these things. And with my friends in medicine and nutrition, and myself as a technologist, like I implemented my protocol, and after 3 months I was basically disease free. And what interesting happened with this was that was designed to be temporary. So I was like basically planning to do that for just try things out, like what happens. And what I noticed afterwards, after 3 months, was that my energy levels were better than they were before I got sick. I didn't have like crashes throughout the day. I didn't have like problems with gut, for example, after being sleep deprived or whatever. So I got really like intrigued, like, okay, so I actually feel like a completely different person now, also cognitively. And the rebound was so massive that I just decided to continue that lifestyle. And I started talking about it to people. I gathered some people together with me in my office, about 40 people of them who would be interested in this stuff. And those people went on to found companies like the Oura Ring now, which is one of the top technologies for measuring your sleep quality. And there was, people from Polar and Suunto and other like wearable technology companies, and people who went on to found nutrition supplementation companies and so on. So that was pretty interesting gathering in 2013 or so. And we started organizing the Biohacker Summit also in 2014 for people who are interested in biohacking. So what is biohacking? That to me is health and performance optimization by utilizing personal data, health, science, and self-experiment. So you're basically the patient zero. You're testing things on yourself. You're guided by data and science. Like you have a strong hypothesis that if I do this, that might happen, but then you test it on yourself. So that's where you have the biomarkers and wearables and genetic tests and all that. And basically you're looking at obviously like things like energy management and stress management and metabolic health, cardiovascular health, recovery, and ultimately cognitive performance, that you're a well-functioning human being. And it all also leads into preventive healthcare, like how do you prevent disease? And I guess this slide pretty much sums it up. So it's not about living long, it's about living healthy years, more healthy years than regular people would do. Like because if you're crippled, you have some chronic disease, your body isn't functioning well, your mind is not functioning well, you're not going to be happy even though you live long. So with medical treatments, we've been able to increase lifespan. So from like 45 to 85 years old, like in modern times with modern technology, with healthy lifestyle, you can push that boundary a little bit. But with biohacking, we look into increasing health span. And that led me to writing the Biohacker's Handbook together with the doctor and the nutrition guy. And this book has over 1,500 references, mainly meta-analysis that came out in the last decade. And this is basically the missing manual for the human body. So we look at areas like sleep, exercise, nutrition, work, and mind, and how those can be seen as systems that you can optimize. And it also has hundreds of illustrations. So this came out in end of 2016 in Finland, in Finnish language, and then we did the English translation in 2019. And it kind of became a international bestseller and part of a bigger movement of biohackers who are interested in the human biology as a computer that can be optimized. And the whole preventive healthcare has really like sprung up as the future of medicine and healthcare in general. So it's moving to a more patient-centered approach where you have data from your lifestyle and health in a much deeper level that helps you to optimize yourself. And when I started doing these things, it was not obvious. It was not easily available. It was not a big trend. And so I was kind of on the forefront of it. And since then, I have also worked with management teams and teach also MBA courses and so on related to this topic, like how you can optimize your health and performance as a leader. And I think that's a very relevant topic. I did, everything wrong in a way. I did many things right, but I did everything wrong by focusing too much on the things outside of me, like how I run businesses and processes and, what techniques and tools I use. But I was neglecting my body, like I was neglecting sleep. I was not, having breaks in an optimal way. I was not eating a diet that would help me to really perform. So in the end, like I learned it the hard way, and I hope that other people don't have to do it the hard way. But unfortunately, the world is full of something I call a very sick high performance culture. So many companies are running on the premise that effectiveness is like just putting more time in, better, faster, stronger. Like you just push the boundaries, work on deadlines, you work until 4 a.m. on your PowerPoint decks, and sometimes they even brag about the fact that I've been working on this project, I haven't slept much, and we're kicking ass. No, you're not. Like you make a lot of mistakes and you pay for it. Like the sick leaves are off the roof, depression, anxiety is off the roof, and you can't be a great manager or example to others if you are like sleep deprived, a bit like nervous and anxious, and you have like physical symptoms. You're not going to perform well. Whatever books you read about management and leadership, people aren't going to reflect on you as a role model in that sense. So to me, like healthy high performance culture starts from bring the system back to balance, because from a balanced state you have more capability of really taking things to the next level, and you as a leader, you're a reflection of the rest of the organization. So if you change yourself, the organization also changes itself, and you are basically an example. People copy and model you. So how do you become a role model for others? That's kind of like the hero's journey that I'm interested in this. And I think many people need to learn it the hard way. So once they get like it's too late, like then they start doing things. And I hope people start a little bit earlier. So that's pretty much what my life mission is right now, is to give people like some tools to bring themselves back to balance and take things to the next level.
Oh, that's great. And it reminds me when you shared the story when it all started, right? It was basically something on your side, on the health side, where you said, what's going on? And then where you noticed, you became aware, I have to do something. And then, of course, you realized that the traditional medicine health system usually is not actually helpful in that way. you may have to do a lot of tests, but they're usually looking at the wrong thing, or they're just not optimized or designed to actually look at the human as a system, at a very complex system. And then, I mean, this is similar when I started into this as well. It's very similar thing that I also got my health technology leader. I was in the Silicon Valley for many years, 20 years, right? A lot of stress, neglected the body, no balance. So I know exactly what you're talking about, right? And this is when it hit me back about 7, 8 years ago, I think 2013, 2014, roughly in this thing, right? And I also became then aware, oh, I have to do something, but what do I do, right? And very similar to what you were describing. So same approach, right? As a scientist, going in there, show me the data. Where do I get the data? What data do I have to look at, and so on. And so this is great. And it looks like, but then in this case, the motivation was first when you said, okay, how can I improve my health again? How can I get back on track? But you learn so much about how to do it. And then at some point there came then the shift where you said, let's now actually see how I can help others sharing this, spreading this knowledge. And I also see the technology aspect of this, right? How can technology assist in doing this? Going back now to this, what you mentioned before, you said that you wanted to understand human as a system, complex system. Also seen that you've done some work of actually mapping this in this blueprint, right? There was, I remember this big blueprint of where the human as a system, I mean, it looks really complex. Um, how much work did you guys put into generating this blueprint? Is it something that there is a link to it in the notes that we can share? I think this would be curious because it's a massive effort, right?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like looking at things from a bigger picture, I think this slide illustrates it pretty well. Like if you go for a doctor, it's all about diagnostics. It's about figuring what happened. It is hindsight basically. It's what happened. It's health information that looks at like what's the current snapshot of you and what might have led to this. And it's great if we are looking for, immediate treatment. So they're not going to treat you unless you have a disease, right? If there's an absence of disease, like there's nothing to do. If your values are a little bit out of balance, maybe your hormones are a bit low, maybe your liver values are a bit high, but you don't have a diagnosed disease, they are not going to do anything. It's just, they're going to follow through. Like if there's some indicators out of proportion, like they might give you some advice, but they send you home pretty much. So it's like the biomarker analysis is pretty much focused on figuring out if you have a disease that needs treatment. Now, what I'm focused on is not hindsight, but foresight. Like if in terms of my patterns of behavior, if I continue these patterns, certain outcomes might happen. Like you increase your risk for dementia, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. So most of the stuff that you get diagnosed is already too late. It's like you should have started doing changes like 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So with biohacking, I'm looking at like large population studies and analysis and so on, and based on my own health data, personalizing those results for myself, looking at preventive disease, like how can we prevent disease outcomes before they happen. And I mean, we both would agree that it's cheaper from your perspective, like to pay now a little bit to optimize your health compared to all the medical bills that you're going to pay later on if you don't. And unfortunately, people invest in these things too late. They invest when it's extremely expensive compared to if you actually invested earlier on. I mean, business leaders would understand this. So, and it's not an easy thing. There is no silver bullet. So every person is unique. And you have to start from, looking at several different parameters, like obviously, like looking at the health records, looking at the, it also depends what age you are. It depends what gender you are. It depends of your ethnic background. If you look at genetic tests, there are different like variables for, let's say, absorption of vitamin D. If you are from the equator, there's a lot of sun. Vitamin D it absorbs less than if you're here in the northern part of the world where there's less sun, so you need to get more in. So people who, let's say, move in from around the equator to, let's say, some other country for work, and just because of their biological background, they might be more susceptible to disease and, let's say, diabetes, which is linked to lower vitamin D levels. So once you become aware of those things, you can map them out. So from the blueprint perspective, you would look at genetics, like what are your risk factors, like are certain risks elevated, certain reduced. But in the end, you won't be able to know unless you take like stronger biomarkers, which is lab tests. So you would look at a wide variety of markers, not just things like cholesterol levels, but you would go deeper into inflammatory biomarkers. You would look at gut functioning, perhaps. You might even look at microbial diversity in your gut. You might look at hormonal levels. You might look at different biomarkers for organ systems, and then okay, you have a snapshot right there of what's going on, and you might get some idea, like, okay, like just to give you an example, when I was 30, I did these tests. My testosterone levels came back at the lower end, which was okay from a medical standpoint. It was within the range, but it didn't give me, the benefits of higher testosterone levels for energy and productivity and so on. So I basically looked at those results, and at 30 years old, I looked like I'm a 45-year-old man. And now at 40, I look like a 25-year-old man from a hormonal perspective. At 30, I looked like I'm almost pre-diabetic. Now at 40, I look like my risk for diabetes is extremely low from a blood sugar management perspective. The same goes for cardiovascular disease risk, that has gone down. So these are not some random variations. These are systemic results from systemic intervention that took 10 years. And so basically, I look younger from a like metabolic health perspective than I looked 10 years ago. And I'm not even old. I mean, I'm 40, and I was 30 when I started doing these things more regularly. But the exponential benefit that you get if you are like 50 or if you're like 60 is significant, because in terms of aging, it just accelerates. And if you correct some issues, it gives you much more leverage in terms of functioning. So if you want to perform well, it becomes more and more important to put in a little bit of exercise. It becomes even more important to eat a healthy diet. When you're a kid, you can eat just about anything you want. Your body's going to sustain it. But once you're like 50, it has a big effect if you are eating like rancid inflammatory oils that are destroying your body, or high sugar amounts that are going to wreak havoc in your metabolic health. So once you have the data, you have something to improve on, and there is a lot of things that, like general recommendations, obviously, that you can take, but in the end, you won't be able to know what really works unless you take a test. For example, vitamin D, how much should you supplement? You don't know until you take the test and you see the measurements, and you see if you're getting enough from it, from diet. If you're supplementing you won't know if you're getting your serum levels to the right level unless you do a test. And so then it helps you to optimize, let's say supplementation. It helps you to optimize things like exercise, even if you're over exercising. I see a lot of business leaders who are high performers who then high perform everything in their life, they're running marathons and they are doing triathlon and all that. and that's an additional stressor already on top of a stressful lifestyle. So your risk for cardiovascular health, like cardiovascular events, goes up if you just push your boundaries too much. So it's important to learn to relax. It's important to learn to recover fast. It's I think in terms of like professional athletes, recovery is part of their training. You don't run from one marathon to another. You take a break, right? So how do you recover? How do you bounce back is very important. How do you spend your weekends? How do you spend, time between meetings when you have an opportunity for it? So it really boils down to, these simple decisions you'd make every day. And cumulatively, it builds up into, health span. Instead of just reducing a lifespan, you can just actually increase health span. And so it's all probabilities. Like I mean, anyone could like just collapse in terms of their health for many different reasons, getting a virus that breaks down the system or whatever. But in the end, you reduce so much your risk for disease and all kinds of side effects of poor lifestyle if you take this seriously. And especially in the year of pandemic, we all heard that the people who are in the risk group are the ones who have underlying disease, are the people who are overweight, are the people who, are not metabolically healthy. And it's not just age, it is, all these things. So obesity is one of the biggest factors right after age. And age is, in the end, it's just a number, Age correlates with chronic disease. So likelihood of having chronic disease. So chronic diseases are a big factor here, cofactor for any kind of like risk for morbidity. So in my mind, like this last couple of years, like 1.5 years, is really good lesson for everyone to really start taking their health seriously. And now people are locked down. They work from home, and they have full control of their lives. So what I teach is like how you optimize your workday from the moment when you wake up to the moment when you go to sleep. Like how can you have a healthy working pattern that actually, once you get out of a lockdown, you're healthier than when you went in. But unfortunately, most of the people in the world now get even more overweight. They get more, chronic disease. They drink even more alcohol. There is a lot of like side effects of it. But if you are conscious, you can actually turn this into opportunity because you have less travel, you have less stress, all these factors. If you like really like put effort into it. Like I personally, I've started meditating like 3 hours every day. Like I did now 1 month where I did 2 to 3 hours of meditation per day because I have the time. I'm not traveling that much. And I see the compound benefits of it. Like I used to do it like on an occasional basis, on a regular basis, but like 15-20 minutes like every few days. But now when I've done it like every day with some breathing exercises, I just kick ass at work. I get so much more done. My mind is so much more focused.
Did you track the effect of the meditation with HRV? Or how did
Yeah, I've tracked with HRV and several other factors. And I can basically in a 20-minute session, I can like double the speed of my recovery. Like I can just like over double my HRV levels with just 20 minutes of focus. But I noticed the effects of breathing exercises to health. So I'm not just meditating. I'm doing like deep breathing techniques before I go into meditation, and that has had the biggest benefit for me. Doing breathing techniques from some yogic techniques like pranayama, but also the Wim Hof method, which is quite popular in biohacking circles, which has also nicely some scientific studies behind it for immunity and so on. And I've done that, like deep breathing techniques with pranayama. And then I combine in my meditation practice, I use biofeedback and neurofeedback. So I use technologies that are giving a signal back from my nervous system to my consciousness that also helps me to go deeper. And I also used something called photobiomodulation. So I use near infrared light and red light, which have a lot of clinical studies behind them for lowering inflammation, speeding up recovery. That's clinically used for diabetic patients to speed up wound healing. I use it for performance reasons. It's like a cup of coffee for me to do it. So I do that combined with some breathing and meditation practices. So, but I have to say that many of the effects of these you can't see in your devices. Like they are you know it in your subjective experience when you don't feel like procrastinating, when you're just like, if you start your day like doing something really hard, then the rest of the day all the difficulties are just easy, because breathing techniques can be hard, like sitting in meditation can be hard, taking an ice bath, it can be extremely hard, or ice cold shower. So once you start your day like doing something very difficult, then the rest of the day just feels easier, and you have more focused mind because you focused attention, you practiced attention, which we don't really like. I mean, we practice all these productivity techniques, but we don't really practice attention. And to me, meditation is the ultimate way of silencing the monkey mind that is just like erratically wandering around, because modern technology like mobile phones and notifications and social media, it's just distraction. It's just like taking your mind somewhere else, and we are in this like we are in this like fast food, fast media culture where everything just comes and goes rapidly, and you feel every second with checking emails and messages, and it can be very hard to do deep work. But if you at least in the middle of all that practice like focusing on one thing at a time, like your breath, it can effects to your ability to focus for tedious, cognitively demanding tasks as well. And that's what research also shows. So for me, the whole pandemic year has been very revealing in terms of how effective meditation breathing techniques can be for productivity.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned, you touched on many different points in there. I think the beginning, what you said, I think this is the key thing is to get started, right? As the human body and mind is a very complex system. There's all kind of subsystems in there. They all run basically independently, but of course they are connected. Everything is connected to each other. And somehow you need to get started, right? You can't do everything at once, but you need to get started. There needs to be some urgency to get started. And probably many of the viewers or listeners now to this discussion here, I think they are in a state where they may not know that they actually have to basically have to make some changes, have to get started, because in my experience, many of people, the mindset is, oh, I'm okay. I have maybe here and there a little bit of stress. Here and there, my sleep isn't that great, but otherwise, I feel okay, right? But they don't know, right? If you look at the quantified self, right? You mentioned biomarkers. Myself, I'm currently tracking more than 300 biomarkers, and you probably do similar things, right? At the end of the day, only when you know the data and when you have the data, then you can make more informed decisions, and then you can
Yeah.
say that, oh yeah, I'm actually not just feeling okay, but I know from the data I am okay. But this awareness, this urgency to get going and actually start doing something, and as you said, it's not a big, you start little steps. It's the sum of those little decisions you do every day that make the big difference, right? And getting people to get going. So I think that's the first thing. But since you mentioned, let's focus in on one topic, which is recovery. You mentioned this now, right? I think recovery, I see there is on one side sleep. So I'm curious on sleep tracking, also how to optimize deep sleep, particularly deep sleep is a key foundation for your support your lymphatic system, right? Which basically flushes out all the waste that builds up over time, keeps the brain basically functioning better on the next day. So deep sleep optimization, but also recovery over the day, right? You also mentioned before that putting in the breathing exercise, a little bit of meditation, right? All those little things that you can do over the course of the day. And any maybe advice on this one, or technology that can assist you during the day? Because at night you already mentioned devices like Oura Ring is one way, but what about over the day? How can you ensure to more systematically sprinkle in these little breaks, right? So that you, at the end of the day, if you summarize everything up, sleep plus those mini breaks, you have sufficient recovery built in on a continuous basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so for any leader out there, like my experience is exactly what you described, that they kind of feel okay, but they'd have no idea how well they could feel. And that's the problem with human consciousness, is that in a context, when you are in a specific mindset, relatively to that experience, that's how you experience things. So relative to your average experience, everything is okay, right? So if you never experienced what it would feel like to be fully eyes open and fully awake, like throughout your day, you have no idea how well you could feel. And from these biomarkers, we can start looking into like areas of improvement that if you address certain things, like if you think of like metabolic health, your biology could work better. We can look at nutritional status even, like if you don't have the building blocks for neurotransmitters and so on. I mean, it's like it's not gonna run. It's like a German car that's not maintained on a consistent basis, and it's running on the wrong gasoline. So relative to your previous experience, things are just kind of running fine, but you have no idea what the engine is able to do if you put the right fuel in it. So that's the other thing. And now, starting from things like recovery, now we are very much focused in the working life to getting things done, right? So we are looking into, being more alert. So people are interested in things like coffee. They are interested in stimulants in general, like to stimulate themselves up. And that's great. I mean, you get a surge of energy, but you get also a crash often. Like you just like, there's a limit how much coffee you can drink, right? So it's not going to compensate lack of sleep, for example. But even in terms of sleep, like we have been told that you should sleep 7 to 8 hours per night. But the question is like, what kind of sleep? So when you dive into the components, you mentioned deep sleep. That's usually what happens in the first hours of the night. And deep sleep is compromised, like, let's say, things like exercising too late or drinking too much alcohol close to going to sleep. And it also is related to stress. So if you're overstressed, like you often get, your sleep is not as sound. If you have a inflammatory condition, like low level inflammation is high, that can also influence your ability to recover and get deep sleep. Now, if you're sick, you often like naturally your body just like puts you in a mode where you sleep more and you recover more. So we know this like from experience. But if your general state of your body is good and you have low level inflammation, you recover faster. And it turns out you also need a little bit less sleep than someone who is like chronically ill or chronically like has low level inflammation, thinks they're okay, but they're not really. And so by having a healthy setup, you get away with more compromise in a way. If you have a deadline, you can like sleep 4 hours per night, a couple of nights, just fine, as long as you get enough deep sleep. But it also you need also REM sleep, which is more of the sleep that you get later in the night for consolidating memories, for learning, and it has other health effects also. They done studies in rodents where they block their REM sleep, they block their deep sleep, they see the results of it. Actually, some sleeping medication, actually, they knock you out, but they reduce your deep sleep. So you're kind of sleeping, but you're not really, like you're just like passed out, and you're not getting the recovery you're looking for. You might sleep that you slept 8 hours, but you still feel a little bit tired. So it might be because of the medication you are taking. So you won't know unless you test these things. And deep sleep is an aspect. We wrote a big article. My co-author, Dr. Olli Soviari, wrote a big article on deep sleep hacks. You can find it at biohackercenter.com. So there's a big article on different ways to measure and improve your deep sleep levels. You usually get like around, a healthy person gets like 1 hour to 2 hours of deep sleep. In that article, we go through like how that can be even increased to 3 hours. And but unfortunately, most of the people and their data I look at, it looks like they get like 15 minutes or 30 minutes of deep sleep, or zero, really. Like they don't get any. And this is the thing that you can measure pretty accurately with wearable technologies. REM sleep is harder. For REM sleep, you would need it's rapid eye movement, so you would need to look at brain waves and eye movement and stuff like that that they can do in laboratories. So with these wearables, you get maybe 60% accuracy of measuring REM sleep. But deep sleep, you can measure pretty accurately with these devices. So that's the thing about sleep. Now you asked about the day, like how can I figure out throughout the day what's going on? And for that, I use Garmin. So here's a Garmin watch, for example. So they built into their watches. I like this because it's like a businessman's clock. Like it doesn't look like this thing here, which is also wearable. So this
Yeah, I know.
it looks awesome. So to me, what it gives me throughout the day is the data set and measurements of your typical day. Let's see if I can perhaps even pull out an example of how it looks like. I'll show you quickly. So what you're basically looking at is your typical day. Here we have it. So I'll just bring it up, turn on presentation. Here we go. Okay, you can see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on the left side, so these are two measurements that have been done on a conference. And day one, day two, big conference, a lot of people, a lot of meetings. I had like 10 to 20 meetings per day, and I also had the privilege to speak on stage and do presentations on both days. So what you see here is on the first day, I basically, here's the like night sleep. That's when I was sleeping, and this is the day. So these are stress reactions. So the higher the bar, the stronger the stress reaction. And as you can see on the first day, I got absolutely no recovery throughout the day. So I didn't get any blue low bars on the first day. On the second day, on the other hand, I got like a lot of recovery throughout the day. And overall, it's telling me that I had enough restful moments. On the first day, it said I had very few restful moments on this day. So the difference between these 2 days is that, and by the way, so this is like measurement throughout the day. And on the difference between these 2 days is that on the first day, I deliberately didn't do anything for recovery. I was just like running from one meeting to another, talking to people, checking emails, all that stuff, like what people normally do. On the second day, I consciously took moments of recovery where I closed my eyes and just took like deep breathing moments, like 1 minute before every single meeting. So, and sometimes I suggested to the other person that, hey, let's do like, I put the phone on the table with a timer and said, hey, it's pretty hectic conference, so why don't we take 1 minute and just eyes closed, like just take a few deep breaths, and then we start. And that's what I did on the first day, nothing else. And you can see like how much better my nervous system looked like on that particular day. And this is the result of just being a little bit more mindful about how to recover, because from your autonomic nervous system standpoint, you have control over one organ, and that's your respiratory system. And through modulating your breathing, you are modulating your heart rate, because those are interlinked. So when you breathe slower, your heart rate goes down. When you breathe like shallow in fast, like what normally people do when they are hectic, that's when your heart rate increases, your heart rate variability goes down. So this is a good example of what happens. And I have another example of like, on average, what being connected to nature does. So using the same measurement technology, here I can see like months when I was in a city environment, what my average stress levels and reactions were. And right here. And here you can see what my average stress levels were. So basically lower the better was when I moved to nature. So I was still working as much. I had still as many meetings and all that, but I was connected to nature. and that on average just made it much better. So in the times of pandemic, a lot of people decided to move out of city and go to countryside and all that. It's pretty good idea actually, because
Literally, you
you're
feel
more
better now, right? And the
you're more in
stress level
tune.
goes down. So it's
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone knows that like 20 minutes walk in a forest will reduce your stress levels. So if you're able to include like a nice walk in a park, do it. Uh, it pays back. If you're able to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths, do it. If you have an argument with a colleague, like take a little bit of distance, take a few deep breaths, and return to the topic. You make better decisions. Like it's obvious, it's simple, but people neglect these things. They are just like sympathetic nervous system standpoint on an overdrive, running from one meeting to another, and they make impulse decisions. I don't think that's leadership.
right. And that's the thing, right? Once you see the data, that's why I like these tracking devices, right? You see the data, it's very clear, right? With this Garmin tracker, right? You could see the blue areas over the course of the day, right? And that has a lot of benefits, right? Because I would suspect then in this night, for instance, deep sleep could be much better, right? Or in general, sleep
Correct.
score could go up.
Yeah.
You
What happens?
basically,
Yeah.
right? It's just, it adds up. There's all those positive things. Wanted to ask you, these are more about recovery, particularly on the mind, breaks, breathing, meditation, and so on. But let's use a few other biomarkers as an example. I've seen you mentioned like testosterone was one. To basically bring it up is a good thing, is clear. There's also another one, GFR or EGFR for the kidneys, right? And I've seen that in one of the videos that you shared, that you were able to really get this up. And so I'm curious on those two biomarkers, because now they're a little bit different. It's probably a combination of different techniques that you did over the years to get these particular biomarkers up.
Yeah, so for that, I mean, regular exercise, even if it's little, like I don't go to the gym and lift heavy weights or go for a run. I do like uh, quite a lot of uh, like basically high intensity interval training where I do like very brief moments, like up to 15 minutes, very heavy things. It could be an exercise bike, it could be lifting weights or something like this, doing push-ups or pull-ups to failure. So I basically do one set to failure and then I'm done. So I don't
Mhm.
even sweat to
Yeah.
death. I'm just like I can do it with my jacket on and continue my day. And that's how I make breaks. If I'm at the computer, I take a 20-minute break. I do 15 minutes of like heavy exercise until failure. I'm done. That's the metabolic impulse. That's the hormonal response, the trigger that tells your body exactly the same as you would get from 2 hours of moderate exercise. So I basically spend 15 minutes for that per day. That's enough. And you get the benefits for hormones, you get the benefits for a lot of things. Now, in terms of like kidney function or liver function, so if your organ systems are able to filter out crap and they do like well from the lymphatic system perspective, because that's like circulating all the crap around. We spoke about deep sleep. That's where the lymphatic system extends to the brain and it pumps out the metabolic waste that accumulates throughout the day, like amyloid plaque and beta, which is linked to Alzheimer's disease. Now, for that, I mean, sleep is important, of course, for many of these things in the end, but on top of that, some dietary interventions are key. So I do have practiced intermittent fasting for a long time. So if you want to bring down your blood sugar regulation, like cut it 30%, just doing like a full 1 day fast, like up to 48 hours once a month is already a significant improvement in blood sugar regulation. And what I do on a regular basis is intermittent fasting, where several times per week I'm skipping things like lunch. Now it sounds like counterintuitive, like based on the nutritional advice that you should, have, snacks and eat every freaking 3 hours or something like this. But for me, and from studies perspective, it's actually a good idea because you are genetically a hunter gatherer who didn't have food all the time. So I would like give a break to my metabolic system for a while. So I would like have coffee in the morning and nothing until dinner. And to be able to sustain that kind of lifestyle, you have to change your fuel sources. So normally people have a lot of carbohydrates and they run pretty much on carbs. So what I did, I changed. I'm running mainly on fats. So I do a ketogenic diet, and ketogenic diet is very good for brain functioning, and it's very good for anyone who does sedentary work, because carbohydrates are awesome if you do exercise, you run on the field, you do like physical work. You need a lot of calories and you need them fast. But if you sit in front of your computer, you're not moving much, like then that's not the optimal fuel source from your organ system perspective. You want to have something that burns more slowly and longer time and gives you more steady blood sugar values, and that's where the ketogenic diet works for me very well. So I would increase the amount of fats compared to carbohydrates. It's not a high protein diet. Like my proteins are still around what they would average for any other type of diet, but I'm like increasing the number of fats, and that works for me and many other people. And it's actually clinically also used to treat pre-diabetic conditions like,
Mm.
for example, and even things like epilepsy and several other like some nervous system disease and so on are clinically treated with the ketogenic diet. But I'm using it for performance reasons, and that has given benefits for cardiovascular health, for liver function, for a lot of things. Like just give a break to your system and use optimal fuel sources for
Mm.
your body. Yeah, but it
But
takes time to adapt to these things, like a
yeah,
couple of months.
it takes time. I also switched to a bulletproof diet, ketogenic diet with some carb cycling. I use a Lumen device to track the metabolic state, right? And it took me at least 6 weeks to get really a move from carb gradually more and more into ketogenic and burning fat. But once you're there, it's amazing to see this, right? You're pretty much in most of the time in fat burning mode. And then
Yeah,
even if you add some carbs, that's fine, right? So your body also knows what to do then still with carbs. But it feels
correct.
like there's, besides the benefits that you mentioned, it feels much in terms of thinking is clearer. There's more energy there, right? And but it requires some work, right? You have to know what to do, how to do it, and there could be a lot of mistakes on the way on doing it, right? So it's not trivial basically to make
Yeah,
these shifts.
absolutely correct. Yeah, and this it's like it takes time to build up. Like for many people in the beginning, it might feel like they have less energy, but it's just that you have not yet adapted. Like there's this metabolic adaptation phase that adapts to this new type of fuel, and once you get there, like it feels easy. And actually going back to having like, let's say, a huge bowl of rice and some cereal for breakfast and all that, it's just like you feel the crash coming. Like you just feel like, oh my god, this actually is not good, like just from an energy standpoint. Like, but it's okay. Like you can eat carbs if you just remember to use a standing desk and you're metabolically active throughout the day and all that. So there is no single diet that is like perfect for everyone, but you won't be able to know unless you test things on yourself. And that's like, I think, very important. And to do for anyone is just to experiment your boundaries. If you never did a fast, if you never like, if you always had a specific diet and you think it's the best in the world, you have no idea how you would feel on a different diet, right? So um, and one thing that I've noticed by looking at people's labs is that when people say I'm eating healthy regular diet, I don't have any fast food or sugary drinks and all that, we still find nutritional deficiencies.
Oh
So
yeah.
there's always things to address in everyone. The doctor I work with, he never saw anyone who had perfect values, never. So
Yeah.
everyone has always something to correct, and especially if you think you are eating a generally healthy diet, there is probably something that can be improved. And And sometimes the thing that you think is healthy is counterwise, like it might not actually be that healthy. You might have like low level inflammation going on a specific diet, so you won't be able to know until you measure things. And that's kind of what led me to these things. And with diets, you have to do it for months until you see the adaptation, the change. And when I say diet, I'm not saying that you should restrict yourself of eating certain things. I'm saying that you should change the proportions, and I'm saying that you should maybe even increase the variety of things that you're eating. So actually, the good thing that comes out of this is that when you reduce the proportion of certain calories, like 60% of world of the world is fed by 10 plants, like potato and rice and soy and manioc and all these things, corn. So it's a very like monocrop culture where there's only a few plants that give us most of the calories. Now, if you increase the number of plants to 100, you just get so much more metabolically active compounds, antioxidants, polyphenols, and all that. The effects of those for brain health and functioning is incredible. Like if you want some sugary things, then you would have like really dark berries with a lot of polyphenols. It has a very big effect on your eye health, on your brain health,
Oh yeah.
to your immune system, etc., your ability to scavenge free radicals, than if you never had any of that stuff. So that's the thing, is that with diets, it's actually permission to eat things that you don't have the room to eat. It's also a permission to experiment on new things, and that's like when people really like get into it, it's pretty eye-opening to them that okay, like eating plants doesn't mean I have a few salad leaves and cucumber and tomato on the side of the plate, but I have like 50 different things, and that's a big difference, like in terms of nutrient intake.
Mhm. Now, if we switch gears just a little bit from the health aspect is one thing. So I hope some of the tech leaders or general leaders watching this notice there is a lot of things that can be done. Usually there's different categories. We talked about recovery, nutrition, exercise, and so on. There's all those different things you do. Then you gradually become healthier, you become more resilient, you have increased energy level, all the good stuff. Now, I'm curious also on your observation now in organizational context, if the leader who's actually now doing all those things, getting healthier, getting better, performing better as well, right? Quality of decisions improves. There's a lot of good stuff. But I'm curious in terms of your observation, the ripple effect on the whole organization, right? Because people observing this, employees observing this, and usually also reflecting back basically what the leader is doing. And so I'm curious on your observation, how this is actually affecting the organization then if the leader actually takes care of him or herself and starts optimizing, right?
Right. Yeah. So basically, mm, I work with a uh, large European bank, and the CEO wanted to invite me for a yearly like all hands meeting with the business unit leaders, like a couple of hundred of them. And I suggested that, hey, we can measure you. We can take tests on you, like I'll send you a O-ring, and we do a few other measurements remotely with specific devices, and he agreed, like, let's do it. So that's a good example. And the results came back, and he was like probably getting a heart attack in the next 5 years if he's not changing his lifestyle. And we went through some of those things, and he was in denial, like it couldn't be, like he's just like performing well, he feels fine, never sick. He went to another doctor, uh, like to get a checkup, and yeah, he had like arrhythmias and stuff like this. He was in a risk group, and yeah, the data came back, and I convinced him then that, hey, let's go on stage, like with your employees. Let's look at your data from the perspective that we can improve them. Like I give you the advice, like how you can make a change here. So now you have the key KPIs, and let's ask people also how they feel, like how they would relate to this data. And although he was reluctant in the beginning, he decided to do it. So he went on stage with the data with me, and we went through of that stuff. And I asked about his lifestyle, and then we went through some things that he could do. And we also asked the audience, like, how many of you feel that you would have worse results than your CEO, and how many of you would feel that you would have better results, and how many of you feel it would be the same. And it was funny enough, like over 60% of them felt that they would have poorer results than the CEO. I don't know if that's like some authority bias right there, that they don't want to like beat the man down, but in the end, like the leader is a reflection of the whole organization. So the line manager were as sick as him. So we then agreed that, hey, let's change these things, let's measure things again a year from now, and we get into a program. So it really motivated them to get a full program to improve the health status of the leadership, and they had the data, and so they got more data, and they were able to improve these markers in the result in the end of a year period. So this was a trigger to become aware of the patterns and how to improve what's wrong. And so that's a good example of that. Really kind of ties up this whole conversation, is that like many of these things have great effects, but you won't know until you test, and you don't have any motivation to change anything if you don't have, you know, some kind of baseline. So we did the baseline, and once you have a baseline, there's something to improve. And every business leader through business school, they know, you know, about KPIs and, you know, customer satisfaction and whatever, like performance indicators. And once you get, you know, those same things from yourself, and you improve them, you will see also then the end result on the bottom line. So you have less sick leaves, you have less absenteeism. Absenteeism is that where you're present in the company, but you are not really like there. You come to the workplace, but you're like or presenteeism in general, where you are basically there, but you're not really there. You're brain fogged. You're not functioning well. You are like a bit inflamed. Maybe you're recovering from a sickness, or it's just about to get sick. So most people, like in most organizations, they lose like 1 to 2 months of productive time per year to these kind of things. And you could just calculate for a company with thousands of people, like how much like is lost, like just in sick leaves and the whole presenteeism thing. And with these kind of approaches, they become part of your balanced scorecard, basically, like how are our employees doing, like how can we improve their health. And now there's all these dashboards that you can hook up, you know, your management team into and see how they are doing. And based on that, you can, you know, prescribe moments of recovery, exercise, maybe even mandatory vacation to just avoid them like breaking down. And I mean, we do like improvement. Like if you're in a formula, you know, your car is full of all kinds of. You're in a race. Your car is full of like different indicators, and the whole driver is like full of indicators. We have a couple of thousand data points from a formula car, but like we don't have the same for business leaders. Like, and you're still, I would say, running a race that is extremely like I mean, there's a lot at stake. So we can have the same kind of data set from business leaders, and we can use the same kind of data to decide, okay, now you need a pit stop, now we need to change a few tires, you know, make a few improvements here and there, and then you're good to go. Because if you continue the race, you're gonna die, like, or the car is gonna like break down. So that's kind of like the analogy here, is that once you have the indicators, you are able to take measures before like crap hits the fan, basically. And that is like what it really all boils down to. What prevention is all about is that you have foresight, you know when to take action. And we would both agree that if you invest your money into prevention right now, you're gonna save so much, because it's so expensive to be in a hospital, bedridden or on a sick leave like for weeks with multiple different problems. So it's just like it taxes you. So it's better to take action before like things break down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's good to that you confirm there is a ripple effect, right? If the tech leader, in general, the leader is taking care well of himself, herself, right? So that you'll feel as an organization, you can measure it. There's lots of different ways on how to measure these things. And so there should be an additional motivation to get started. And as we're now also approaching the end of the session, we're already a little bit over time. I would say I would ask you about maybe 2 or 3 of your tips to get started when it comes to maybe training your nervous system, getting more resilient, increasing energy levels. What would you basically recommend to those tech leaders watching this here to say, oh, now I'm got motivated, I want to get going, right? What are 2 or 3 things that are these first steps that you say this is something that makes a lot of sense, gives you the most bang for the buck, it's easy to do, and there's no excuse not doing it?
Right. Yeah. So first is like be honest to yourself what you're struggling with. Like if you don't sleep enough, if you have stress management issues, like if you don't move, you think your diet is crap, like what are the what do you feel yourself? You probably know what you are struggling with, and that's a good starting point, and that's a good pointer also on what you might need in terms of devices or technologies or facilitation to change that. So many people ask me like recommendations, what should I get? If you don't have any sleep issues or whatever, but you have maybe some nutritional things, I would probably look at like some lab tests instead of like a wearable. If you are like not sleeping enough, you have stress management issues, then maybe a device that measures your sleep and stress recovery, that could be a good thing. So that's a good starting point. The second one is because we are not really that accountable to ourselves. We are always accountable to others in businesses. Like we're accountable to the team or the project or whatever life goals you have, of meeting the ends, but we are not really accountable to ourselves. We know we are not in a healthy state. Like if there's no one to prove yourself to, like but yourself, you're less likely to do it. So that's where where like facilitation comes in. Like get a personal trainer, a coach, someone who knows better, who can do the research for you, like knows how to interpret your data sets and all that. It's a big plus. Like especially if you're super busy and you don't have time to dive into all this stuff yourself, get some external advice. And the benefit is that then you're accountable to someone. You're accountable to that person that, hey, I'm going to do this, and you come back to that person on a weekly basis to check what's going on, and constantly reminds you of the things that you should be doing in terms of getting yourself back on track. So I think it's good to get some external help also for these things. And yeah, the third thing is get the biohacker's handbook and
Yes.
figure out how your body works. It's good to get some like basic training and understanding on health and fitness and well-being, and because there is so much information out there that is what people think is common sense, what they think is like newspapers and tabloids are writing about, and the deeper I dive into it, I realize that there is a lot of disinformation out there, even on mainstream media. So it's important to go in and really figure out like things about diets, about exercise protocols, and so on. Like maybe like running on a treadmill and not eating is not the healthiest way to lose weight, for example. It's actually the worst. So there's a lot of counterintuitive things that are going on with health and fitness. Like if you want to lose weight, like it's about more about changing your diet, and not necessarily calories, but the type of like macronutrients you're getting, than it is to, let's say, exercise, even than it is to cut certain things. Like a lot of people would think that like going low fat is the way to lose weight, that they're eating too much fat because fat is on their body. But it turns out that actually increasing the number of fats, reducing sugars, might be an even more effective way of burning that off. Like it's
Mm,
supported by studies. So getting some of that like basic understanding is I think is important, to be not ignorant but to actually know what to do. And yeah, so maybe it's changing the podcast that you listen. Like maybe you should listen more more Reiner Kraft or like whoever
Yeah.
is out there in terms of health and fitness. Like Dr. Rhonda Patrick has a lot of great information online about these things, and um, Peter Attia is another great one. And I personally also like in terms of biohacking and personal development. Yeah, general like Tim Ferriss has always been good, but yeah, Aubrey Marcus is awesome also. And yeah, there is a lot of good stuff out there that people should dive into if they want to keep up with what's going on, and maybe trigger some additional motivation to go test these things on themselves.
No, that makes sense. So thanks again. We'll definitely put some links to the resources like the Biohackers Handbook. There's also, I remember there's a Biohacker Stress Manual. There's a few other resources. We'll
Yeah,
basically put links to all those things there, and we'll also
and
summarize a few of the action items that came out of this later on. So everyone who
and
listened or
uh,
viewed the session will find those things in the notes. And yeah, thanks again for Teemu for taking the time, sharing all those insights. And yeah, I encourage everyone who saw this, get started, do a few things, follow some of the ideas, suggestions, give it a try, start measuring. I think that's the key message for me is always start measuring so that you actually have data. Get the data, and then you're in a better situation to actually make informed decisions, and it builds up over time. That's
that's
for
correct.
sure.
Absolutely
Um,
correct.
yeah,
Yeah, and
good.
we also have a YouTube channel, so Biohacker Summit on YouTube. That's our event series we run for already 10 years. So there's a lot of great material from people who are even more knowledgeable than I am, recordings of their talks about different topics. So also check Biohacker Summit. I'm also starting to put more of my own interviews and sessions like with some top experts over there. So that might be another channel for you. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.